Hello, and welcome to the latest episode of Legal Bites, the official podcast of Cummings and Cummings Law, where we focus on helping businesses and their stakeholders re-domesticate out of volatile legal and tax environments to more predictable pro-entrepreneurship, pro-growth jurisdictions. Today, we are reviewing a recent analysis by Dr. Shane Goodwin of the Southern Methodist University Dedman School of Law and my alma mater, the Cox School of Business at that same university, exploring the trend of companies large and small evacuating Delaware and other jurisdictions in favor of the Lone Star State. But first, a brief introduction. My name is Chad Cummings, and I am an attorney and certified public accountant, serving clients in matters of business, tax, and commercial law. I am Chief Executive Officer of the multi-state, multi-attorney law firm Cummings and Cummings Law. And in addition to my day job, I also teach business and tax law at the university level. I hold 4 degrees, including 2 law degrees, as well as a bachelor's degree in accounting and a master's degree in taxation, in addition to 11 professional licenses and certifications covering accounting, tax, audit, and of course, the law. My firm website is www.cummings.law. In June 2024, when this trend arguably began, although we could make an informed argument it started sooner, Tesla and SpaceX re-domesticated from Delaware to Texas. At the time, it was easy to dismiss that as a grievance by Elon Musk, the archetypal billionaire, or I should say now trillionaire eccentric, against the Delaware Court of Chancery. In other words, it was personal, it was political, it was just one man. Well, we know now it was not just one man. Shane Goodwin, executive director of the SMU Corporate Governance Initiative, mapped the trend using Jeffrey Moore's technology adoption framework, which is a really good idea. I'm a little jealous I didn't think of that. And he published the data on LinkedIn. Moore's model describes how a category moves from innovators to mainstream adoption by crossing what Moore calls the chasm, that is, the gap between early adopters and the early majority. Goodwin's finding is that Texas redomestications are at that chasm right now, and the June 2026 cohort may have been the group that actually crossed it. 8 companies voted to redomesticate from Delaware to Texas in that month. Combined market value almost $300 billion with a B dollars. Dell Technologies, which I have reported on in an earlier episode of Legal Bites, was the anchor tenant, so to speak, with a stockholder vote on June 25th. And around that same time, other companies, including First Cash, Weatherford, Archer, Dream Finders Homes, Natural Gas Services Group, Air Sale, and Spruce Power. The breadth is the point. It's not one industry. It is energy, aviation, home building, fintech, and power generation, all moving in the same direction in the same month. I don't think that's a coincidence. Goodwin mapped the diffusion curve. 2024 was the innovator phase, Tesla and SpaceX. 2025 was the early adopter phase, Coinbase and Dillard's. 2026 is still the early adopters phase, transitioning to the next phase, including right now ExxonMobil plus the cohort of 8 that I just mentioned. If this pattern extends into 2027, and I think it will, the early majority begins. In other words, we are just at the beginning of this story. And by the close of this month, more than 25 companies with over $4 trillion in aggregate market value will have committed to leaving Delaware for Texas since June 2024. 25 companies. That does not include the myriad small and medium-sized businesses I have personally redomesticated on behalf of clients out of Delaware to Texas. So take these numbers and understand that reality is probably a little bit larger. That's $4 trillion over 2 years, speaking, of course, of this 25 cohort group. That's quite a large number in a relatively short period of time. The reasons have been covered in my earlier presentations on Legal Bites, but to briefly recapitulate, the Delaware Court of Chancery's decisions in Tornetta versus Musk shook confidence in the predictability and stability of Delaware corporate law. Subsequent decisions constrained shareholder agreements in ways that the market viewed as contrary to accepted commercial practice. Delaware responded with litigation, but that litigation generated its own controversy when reporting revealed that it was drafted with input from lawyers for Tesla and Musk, as well as input from lawyers at Meta, or at least that's what the allegations say. Now, Texas, in the same period, launched its business court, codified the so-called business judgment rule, and amended the Texas Business Organizations Code to permit jury trial waivers and exclusive forum provisions. Texas has already built the infrastructure and the companies responded. What matters for small and medium-sized business owners is that the legal mechanism these Fortune 100 companies are using to move to Texas is the same mechanism available to, for example, a single member LLC. With all of that in mind, let's shift gears now and talk a little bit more about redomestication in more technical, practical terms. Redomestication is the lesser known legal process of transferring a company's state of domicile to a new jurisdiction without dissolving it, without creating a new entity, and without triggering federal income tax consequences, but only when performed with the strict formalities required by the Federal Internal Revenue Code, applicable Treasury regulations, and the statutory frameworks of both the destination and departing states. When executed correctly, the company retains its existing federal employer identification number, contracts, credit history, and bank accounts. That is to say, there is zero operational or financial disruption. I have successfully completed redomestications for clients from all 50 states and for limited liability companies, partnerships, Subchapter S entities, and Subchapter C corporations. And knock on wood, I don't know if you could have heard that or not, I have a 100% success rate to date. That is to say, we've gotten pretty good at doing these. Now, foreign entity registration is not the same thing as redomestication. Foreign entity registration, also referred to as foreign qualification, does not change the company's state of domicile. Rather, it keeps the entity in the former jurisdiction indefinitely and merely adds a second layer of compliance and tax obligations in the destination state. Meanwhile, a traditional merger, which is also not the same thing as redomestication, creates a new distinct entity in the destination state, may require the issuance of a new federal employer identification number, and can trigger serious tax consequences. Finally, dissolution should not enter the conversation at all, because dissolution terminates the company. Dissolution is a going out of business maneuver, not a relocation mechanism. Dissolution is often a taxable event, and when performed incorrectly, can expose the owners of the company, be they partners in a partnership, shareholders in a corporation, or members in an LLC, to unlimited personal, joint, and several liability for the company's liabilities, known and unknown. If you have a so-called professional suggesting dissolution as a relocation mechanism, I would encourage you to seek a second opinion. Redomestication, when paired with a change of personal residency and this is an important and, a reduction or outright cessation of business operations in that former state, can reduce or even eliminate state tax exposure there for the entity and its owners. Don't take my word for it, ask your CPA. Now is the time to consider acting before the Delaware legislature changes the law to hinder or even eliminate the option of redomestication. If you have questions regarding potentially redomesticating your existing limited liability company or corporation out of Delaware or out of another state, please use the link in the description for more information on this process and to schedule time for you and I to speak one-on-one about your specific scenario. Again, my name is Chad Cummings, and I hope that you found this information informative. As always, the information in this presentation is necessarily general in nature and is not legal or tax advice, nor should it be construed as such, because that advice definitionally must be specific to a particular set of facts and circumstances. Should you have any questions regarding this information or the content of any of my many earlier presentations on these timely topics, please visit my firm website at www.cummings.law, not .com, but .law to schedule time for a consultation. And I look forward to that opportunity to speak and perhaps even work with you very soon.